one thing I wanted to say is that really Peter was one of the pioneers of the trauma work, and it made such a big difference to what we know about human beings. And when I think of trauma work, what it could do, I always wish that Peter did that work 5,000 years ago. Because all the spiritual teachings, most of them didn't know what they were why it was so difficult for their students to be able to be opened. Most of them were traumatized. And they kept yelling at them and getting mad and frustrated. And that's why each teacher would be lucky if they had 2 realized students. Most of the students couldn't move. And now we know a lot of it has to do with trauma. It wasn't just the self or the mind, as many teachings say. Trauma is really a very big thing. And that's why I recommend for anybody who wants to do spiritual work, if you have trauma, work with your trauma. It will make your spiritual path so much easier. I've seen it with my students. I've sent them to trauma therapists. So it's really very important. But one thing I want to say, that you've all made it. We've all made it. The fact that we're humans. Human is could be the most miraculous thing there is in the universe. I mean, people think about the absolute, the ultimate, the divine, and they think the beauty, the majesty, the miraculous thing. But the fact is that if it wasn't for the human, nobody would know about any of those things. Who knows about these things? Who experiences them? Who allows this beautiful spiritual nature to wake up to itself? It can't do it just by itself. It needs a being. And what we found out is that the being that we know so far who can do that is the human being, much more so than any other being we know. One thing also I'd like to dispel from what many teachings say is how many teachings make it sound like the individual human being is an illusion. That you as an individual is an illusion, this world, the physical world is an illusion. It's created by your mind, created by your thought. And the fact of it, from my experience, it's not true. The human being is real the way human beings experience themselves. The problem is not that we are an illusion. The problem, the way I see it, or the difficulty, is that we think the way we experience ourselves is the only way we can experience ourselves. That's really the barrier, and there are many things that create that barrier. So I am one of the people who believe that our physical world is not an illusion, is real as it is, human beings, the way most human beings experience themselves, as real as they are. And I mean, think of this physical universe, how amazing it is, and the way science has shown it, and this not vast and beautiful and amazing, but how it functions according to laws that govern things, and that is so ordered and so organized. You think if it was an illusion and a fantasy, how can it be so self-consistent, so self-organized, so ordered? I could say, well, divine makes it that way, ordered. Well, yes, that's true, but that doesn't mean it is not wonderful on its own. And the other thing about that, the fact that it is ordered, that it has order, it has laws that govern it, that, there is a lot of trouble in the world, of course. I don't want to miss that. A lot of trouble, there's a lot of violence, a lot of, terrible things that human beings do. But the fact of it, that human beings really developed mathematics. We have mathematics. We developed mathematics. Not only we developed mathematics, we developed mathematics that we can apply in the physical world and understand it even further. Who would have thought you could take a formula and use it to understand a physical phenomena? Think of that. That's amazing. But it is done now all the time, and people take it to be as ordinary thing. That mathematics, like Schrodinger equation or Einstein EMC square, is an amazing formula, but it is math that came up by human mind. This human mind is amazing. And it created our civilization, created our science, it created our knowledge, we live longer, all of that. But that's just the beginning of being human. That's the thing, you see. So many of the spiritual teachings said, yes, that's all that true, but what matters is the spirit. And this is true. Without being aware of the sacred, of the spirit, then this life, regardless how amazing, it's difficult for us to appreciate its beauty. It's difficult for us to live it as fully as it is possible, as it is potential for us. So in some sense, you can say, the title of my talk is that the human being is a wormhole to the secrets of reality. It is a wormhole. Wormhole is a place in time and space, like a gap in time and space, where if you get into it, you appear in another place in time and space instantly. You don't need to travel. That's one of the results of Einstein theory, of gravitation. I think of the human being as this physical body is a very important part of being a human being, and freeing the physical body is so important to recognize how we are in wormhole. Wormhole means we can be open, we can travel to, we can experience, perceive other possibilities, other dimensions of experience that are not visible to us, that are not physical, or at least not what we perceive directly, physically. So one thing about that is that many traditions see it that the human being is important, like in Buddhism. You're lucky you're born as human because you can only be enlightened if you're human, which is most traditions think that way, that human beings are the only being who can open up to the full possibility of recognizing what we are. So in that sense, you made it, you became human. So you have that possibility. It is part of our potential. As far as we know, who knows, there might be other being in the universe who has that potential too. So it is true that the sense of self, or the thinking mind, or the thoughts, or trauma, can obstruct us from seeing more of what we are. Basically, what it does, it thickens or clogs the consciousness that we are. And that is an important point to understand. Because when people these days talk about consciousness, they think of it as in the most advanced spiritual sense, meaning pure, universal consciousness, meaning the underlying, what some transient thing is the ultimate reality. That is true, that is consciousness. But each human being is a conscious being. Is a conscious being in the sense we are both a body and a consciousness inseparable from each other. Like when you sense yourself, what is sensing? Is it just the physical body and its neuron doing it? If you feel yourself or the totality, your subjectivity, there's a whole field of sensitivity of different kinds, of images, thoughts, sensations, feeling, all of that. That is consciousness. And it is possible if we work with what thickens the consciousness, what makes it more opaque, that it becomes more transparent, more pliant, more vulnerable, which is really part of being human, to be vulnerable, which means to be impressionable, to be influenceable, which is why we learn, how we learn, but we also can be influenceable from inside as our consciousness becomes transparent. Meaning that consciousness is not just universal consciousness, but there is what I call individual consciousness. Like each of us is a body with an individual consciousness. And my individual consciousness is not like your individual consciousness. It's unique and different. And different people, individual consciousness, are of different degrees of openness or different degrees of transparency. And spiritual work is to make that individual consciousness transparent. So it can transparent not only you can feel other people and you're more attuned and more empathic, but you are also transparent to the inner possibilities, the potential of being a human being. When we open to the potential of being a human being, we realize that part of the potential is to be the sacred. That the sacred is our nature, but our nature is the nature of the human being and the nature of everything, but the human being is the one who allows the sacred to know itself. I don't know if a lizard can do that. As far as we know, a lizard probably doesn't. But human beings seem to be able to be quiet enough, to be clear enough within themselves that they can be aware of something that is not what we call the ordinary world, what we call physical or what we call emotional, what we call mental, but what most people call spiritual. So I'm a wormhole in the sense I can take one step, which is a step of attention or consciousness, and be in a different reality, see a different reality, experience a different reality, meaning that is a potential. Follow when I say I mean every human being. We are, in some sense, the being that the universe, in its totality, both physical and non-physical, has been able to develop that makes it possible for the universe to see itself, to know itself. and for God to see God, for God to walk on earth, for God to have sex. You know, God can't have sex without an animal, without a body. Regardless how divine and how is the source of creation, I see I'm going in sort of in a certain trajectory. Just first, I want to talk about the amazing treasures, the amazing mysteries that is possible, the potential for us as a human being. But I want to circle back to our ordinary human life and its preciousness. So I would like you, hopefully from this, to learn or come with greater appreciation, a few preciousness as a human being, and the preciousness of each human being. Because each human being is really not only sensitive and alive and has rights and all of that, but it is a treasure. It is an amazing treasure. It's like a lens, a microscope, a telescope, an instrument, a vehicle through which the universe can know any part of itself, can experience any part of itself and all of its dimension, any depth, and any possibility. And I will say there are many universes, and even the spiritual universe is not only one. So people talk here, Zaya Maurizio started with non-duality, which is one of the main teaching of spirituality, and the non-dual universe, which is seeing the fact that we are not separate from each other, that we are all not just connected but one. We are made out of the same spirit, the same sacred presence, and hence we are inseparable from each other. We all make up one unity. There's no separation, which is really one of the potentials of a human being can experience. One potential is to experience myself as an individual who walks, who's separate, who has preferences, who suffers and has pleasure, whatever. But also another potential is to recognize I am everybody, I am everything. And the feeling of bliss that comes out with it, the feeling of inner contentment, the feeling of kind of silence that can go so deep. There's no end to it. Silence that feels like home. And a home that we can take with us wherever we are on earth or in terms of our physical universe. So non-dual teaching shows one of the possibilities, one of the potentialities that is possible for a human being when a human being is clarified, is free, is the human consciousness is free of the construct, free from the impression of the past that made it rigid, not flexible, not malleable. Shows us one possibility. But that is one possibility out of thousands. And I was reading Krishnamurti a few days ago, and he talking about some of his experiences. And he wrote a little journal or something. And he doesn't talk about non-duality. He doesn't talk about non-separateness or anything like that. He talks about he wakes up from sleep and the immensity is in the room. The sacredness fills the room, overflows into the garden. And he says, there's nobody there to observe it. It's just the sacredness. There is no human there, no observer, no experiencer, but there is the sacred. Do you call that non-dual? That's not non-dual. You see, non-dual means you and everything else are the same thing. There is no you. And the non-dual, I am the absolute. I am the mystery. In the kind of experience that Krishnamurti is talking about, there is no I am. It's more like there's nothing that I am. I'm not being anything. And that is a kind of experience that is possible for all of us. And it brings a kind of selflessness that is more selfless than being the absolute, because it is not being anything. Because if you are being that, because what is the absolute? The ultimate self, which is great. The final self, the Brahman, the para-Brahman, and the vastness, the silent witness that witnesses the whole universe. And you can have that experience. That is one of the potentialities of being human. But you could also not be anything. Not selfless. Selfless means you're something that's selfless. Your consciousness that is selfless. Here, you're not consciousness. You're not awareness. You're not presence. You're not anything. Yet, the sacred is presence. The sacred is presence. All the mountain is there. Or here, all these human beings, precious human beings. Nobody here observing the human being. It's just human being, everybody just being themselves as what they are. So that is a possibility, a potentiality that if we stay with the being non-dual, although it's wonderful, it's the freedom and enlightenment, it stops us from seeing this other possibility. I'm just giving you one example of many. But what is common to all of these things, it is always the human being. Without the human being, none of that happens. So when some teachers say the human being is an illusion or a construct, I know that there are experiences, there are ways of experiencing the spiritual where you see that there is no individual, no human being. You are the everything. But if you ask any of those people, even though you are everything and you are everywhere, what happens to your perception? Is your perception everywhere? No, the perception is localized. This is always a locus of perception and experience. Meaning, I can be everywhere until my realization, yet my perception of this room, not of Bombay. If I am being everywhere, my perception is everywhere, it'll be like white noise so much that I won't perceive anything. So the fact if there is always a locus of experience, implies even though in the experiences where there is no individual, I am the everything, there is something about the human being that remains, that gives the locus of experience and also gives the experience what is called by some philosophers first personal givenness. It's your experience, not somebody else. No? When Nisargadatta Maharaj says, I am everything and all of that, and everybody is like that, it is true, but the people listening to him are not having that experience. He's having that experience. But he's a human being, even though he said, I am the absolute. I am the unmanifest. So I think the theme of this conference, SANT conference this year, really brings us to something very important that I think neglected by many spiritual teachings, and it is, I think it's a corrective. For many people are looking for transcendence, which is to go beyond the human, and Maurice, you said that right at the beginning, in a nice sort of way, which is, we think we're going to be transcended, but even the transcended human being, the greatest masters who live in pure transcendence, they are not the individual, they're witnessing the universe, they still won't walk in front of a truck. Because they're still the physical body, regardless of their immensity. So illusion, if it is an illusion, it doesn't matter, let the truck run over it. You can imagine it again afterward. One thing that I find about human being, not only that the sacred needs us. God needs the human being to know itself, just as the human being needs God to exist, to be and to live. But the situation is much wider, much more mysterious. The human being potential is so miraculously mysterious, so miraculously still not known. I don't think, you think of evolution, how much the physical body is going to evolve, we don't know. But the inner evolution, it's easier to know. It's because it's been known for 1,000 years of what is possible. But that doesn't mean we've reached the end, because everybody says the potential of spirit is infinite. But the potential of spirit is the potential of the human being is infinite. So I can be the vastness of almost like, feels like intergalactic space where the whole universe arises, or I can experience myself as transparent, faceted diamond, being here, and speaking happens. Or I can be as this human being. See, this is another thing interesting about the non-dual. You are everything by being the vastness. by being a vast expanse, and the vast expanse that contains everything, and that way you feel you are everything. But there is another way of being everything that points to the preciousness of the human being, which is, as a human being, as this small human body, limited, finite human body, it is possible, as one of the spiritual realization, to experience that this physical, small, finite human body contains the whole universe. Contains not just the whole universe, contains all the spiritual universes. Not only the spiritual universe, in all times. I call it total being. Not many teachings talk about these days, known throughout history, some teachings. But these days, everybody is into wanting to the transcendent and the non-dual, which is wonderful, but I'm saying human being is a lot more than that. That's limiting. To just stay with that, to look for the ideas, to let ourselves not know, be open, and let things happen. Let the potential arise and see what we find. And be playful with it. It's fun. In that sense, we are a wormhole. Each one of us is a wormhole. A wormhole in the sense we are an entry into any part of reality, or spiritual or physical. So to recognize the human being just by being the finite being, the physical finite being, can experience itself, can know oneself as the totality of all of reality in all the physical dimensions and in all the spiritual dimensions. That is an amazing thing. It shows the importance of the human being, that the human being is not, how can that be an illusion? It is the totality of the universe. And I want to say that we can live that way. We can live as a human being, as a finite human being who lives in a particular place, walks and eats and has friends and relationship, all that important, that as our part of us, an important facet of us, but there is a lot more. There is a lot more there's a lot more, the infinity, the many facets, many spiritual universes. Like when people talk about consciousness, they talk consciousness. We're going to just find consciousness, find presence. Yes, that's good. That's a good beginning, but that's the beginning of a spiritual life. Spiritual life means then you find out what can happen then. What happens to enlightened people? They just feel enlightened and that's it? They begin to live. Their life becomes more dynamic, more alive, more translucent, and more kinds of enlightenment can happen. All the possibilities of spirit begin to show. And we start seeing that this physical world and the other world, the spiritual universe, are so entangled, so inseparable from each other. And we are that whole totality. And the spiritual universe, also many universes. Consciousness is just one expression, actually, of spiritual reality, of the sacred in us. Many people take it as the ultimate. I thought that way for a long time, but at some point I wisened up. I learned that wasn't true. It is just an expression. That the sacred is much more mysterious than that. And then, so it's nothing, it's just emptiness. And that was true. I became Buddhist. And everything doesn't really exist, just appears to exist. But in reality, non-existence is nature. But then I realized that's also one way of experiencing reality. Reality can be other ways. Reality can be in a way where existing or not existing are simply irrelevant. That is the creation of our concepts. We have existed and non-existent. Do I exist or do I not exist? Is Descartes correct or not? Well, there are ways of realization where the question of existence and non-existence is basically irrelevant. It's just like you are from another parallel universe where they have a different kind of spirituality, where the question of existence is not what's relevant, it's something else. That's possible for us, for human beings. So I'm just expanding our horizons of what a human being can be. And I'm saying all that totality, all that, all that richness, all that infinities from so many directions, so many ways, all of that can be our interiority if we are clear. And part of that clarity is to work through the trauma. You see, if we work through all the impediment to the lens that is the human consciousness, that human consciousness is completely clear, completely transparent, then all that totality and all that can live a human life. All of it. So the inside of us is all that totality, all these possibilities, but in everyday life, we live like everybody else. Simple, free, and, nice human being. And this kind of nice human being will be difficult for them to harm anybody else or want to harm anybody else. So really what it turns out is that to live the human life, the personal human life, is really as important as living as consciousness, pure consciousness or pure awareness. It is really pure awareness that lives the personal life with its interaction, with liking certain kind of food, wanting to cook something or another. And then I have my latte now. Who wants to have latte at that time? You could think of it as just this physical body, but sometimes it is really the whole universe wants a latte. The totality of the universe prefers its latte. Double shot, please. You see? Or ice cream. Right? I really don't have much to say except that we're really amazing as human beings. That as a human being is something precious we need to treasure. We need to treasure, and living is a matter of this preciousness growing, learning, developing, becoming more and more complete, more and more completely itself, meaning being open to its possibilities, both physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, and all that totality, all of it, living every moment. So I don't really have anything more to say. Let's see if there's any questions. I don't think questions were organized about this, but I ran out.
Hello. Ice cream cone. Not a question,
Yeah.
just a reflection.
Yeah.
You know, as you were talking, I was really seeing also at the same time Krishnamurti speaking. Thank you.
Yeah, so you remember Krishnamurti. Yeah, that time, Krishnamurti, yeah. The one who, when we are over 60 or 70, we remember Krishnamurti. Yeah.
Hamid, thank you so much.
Yes, Dan.
It's great to be here with you. You know, I was once teaching in Romania, and there was a quote from Krishnamurti, and I was wondering if you could reflect on how this quote from his words can be something we deal with now, which is the ability to adapt to a sick society is not a sign of mental health. And I wonder if you can, given where we are in the world today,
that's what most people trying to do.
Yeah.
To adapt to sick, because our societies in general are sort of sick in the sense we are incomplete. Sick in the sense, not just we are just neurotic. He didn't mean that. He meant we don't really know ourselves. We're not clear about ourselves, what we are, what's possible for us. And so trying to adapt to a society that is ignorant, right? We have to be ignorant like them. There's a Sufi story. This reminds me of a Sufi story like that. When the waters were changed. It's one of the stories that Idris Shah, some people who read Idris Shah has written. And that story is that there was one man living in some society, some village, whatever, and he found out that he has his stash of water someplace in his house. He noticed that something changed in the river, and the water was changed. And so all humans changed. They start becoming what we call normal human now, which is not aware of themselves. And he saw that, and he kept going back to his stash of water so that he doesn't go to sleep. And then he stayed like this for a while, but at some point, you see, he decided that it's too much. He couldn't handle it, so he went and drank from the river. That's the adapting, you see. That's what we all tend to do. And really, true liberation, whatever it is, psychological or spiritual, is to wake up and to find out what we are truly. What we are truly, what is our potential, to be free, meaning free to be what we are, and free for our potential is liberated to manifest itself, whatever it is. And then when we are like that, one of the main things that many people encounter is the experience of aloneness, feeling alone, that you're really alone. Other people are different. You can't talk to people. You can't just say what's on your mind when you experience. And but the aloneness, which Krishnamurti talk about also a lot, is that the inner experience of silence or stillness, that is depth of the human spirit, is when you get into it, it's a kind of aloneness. You feel alone, but the aloneness, we feel alone not because there are no people. You can't be alone with people, because this aloneness has to do with the fact there's nothing inside you, nobody else inside you. no memories inside you, no memories that are making you feel, you know, the inner dialogue that, you know, Castaneda talked about, you know, that there's always a dialogue. When the dialogue is gone, we feel alone. That aloneness, the thing about it, Krishnamurti treasured it. He sought it. He used to go walk in the jungles and to feel alone, because that's where he experienced the sacred. Because this aloneness, it's really our spiritual home. And that this aloneness is kind of very delicate, very soft, very tender intimacy. Intimacy with one's nature, intimacy with one's body, with one's thoughts, intimacy that means complete in touchness, tender in touchness, intimacy with everything, and intimacy with the whole universe, like you are the inside of everybody, the inside of everything in the universe, and intimately in touch with it from within it.
Last question, okay? Yeah, hold on. Oh, fun. Okay. So my question is, I think at the core of everything there will always be a question, no matter how long consciousness is around and awareness is around. So if there is always a question to be asked, there is always at the core fundamentally a sense of unknowingness. So if there's always I don't know mind, how can we really understand humanity or anything if there will always be something to be known?
I don't know if I understand the question. I probably didn't hear it well.
I'll try to say more clearly. I guess there will always everything has. I'll ask you in person.
Yeah. Good.
There is one more. Where?
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about the total being?
Total being?
Yeah, from your own experience or like your own direct experience.
Yeah, I only talk from my experience. First, I want you to know that. So total being is actually some old traditions used to know, to discuss it, some teaching know about it. It is not, you see, in the non-dual experience, you are the medium of consciousness that pervades everything. So you are everything that in the now. So the consciousness becomes the now. The now is a kind of presence that is aware of itself, and that presence is, because it is infinite and contains everything, it is everything. But that is in the now. Total being is experiencing the same thing as the non-dual experience of everything, but experiencing it at all times. So the experience is not only experiencing oneself as all space, but as all time. And in non-dual, you're like all space. Although the non-dual say they are beyond space, they're not beyond space, because they talk about being spacious and they expand and all of that. That's just a spatial metaphor. So one extends everywhere. And total being, it's both space and time. So you experience, you are everything in all. I mean, it's just like Einstein, he says space and time is space-time, you know. So space-time is one space. So total being has that, so you're You're everything now, but you're everything at all time. Not only that, but you are. But what does it mean? You are everything all the time. There is nothing really. It's difficult to say you are also the Eiffel Tower, because, the Eiffel Tower, only people experience the Eiffel Tower. We don't know exactly what an Eiffel Tower is. Just as neuroscience is saying now, you don't know. Your mind interprets it and you say this is the Eiffel Tower. So there are the various experiences of the various beings. Total being is not only everything, but is the experiences of all beings, of their experiences at all times. So just like you are your experiences of yourself at all time of the past, you're also of all time in the future, and also the experience of everybody at all times in the past and all time in the future. So I call that total being because there is no other concept for it. Non-dual being doesn't really do it. And we find that is one possible realization, one way of experiencing the sacred, is that the sacred pervades all of that. The sacred is the one who's having all those experiences. And the sacred is not in the past, not in the future. That's the other thing that another person, Dogen, mentioned, which is true nature or consciousness is not something that is there and you discover. It is there when you experience it. You cannot say it was there before that. Otherwise, time passes on it. Time is in it, not outside it. So consciousness or the sacred or the spirit, it really contains all time, all space, and all experiences of all people, because it is what experiences. It is the experiencer. Even though that experiencer can also give up its experiencing sense and become a non-entity, nobody. That's my favorite, being nobody. And when I walk around the street, who's walking? Karen, my friend, asked me, who's walking? Nobody walking. She asked me, what is walking? Good question. What is walking? Nobody walking. So anyway, do I have more time? I think I'm finished.